Everyone, we welcome you to the Wednesday, July the 15th of 2020 Board of Trustees meeting for the Utah Transit Authority. I'm joined by my colleagues Beth Holbrook and Kent Millington. I'm Carlton Christensen, Chair of the Board of Trustees. We will begin our meeting. Just as a reminder, those who have submitted comments electronically were provided to the board previously, and certainly we welcome public comment in the future and through our website or our board email. And certainly at the conclusion of the meeting, we'd welcome any additional comments others would like to make. We'll begin our meeting with our Safety First Minute. With that, we'll turn to Sheldon Shaw. Good morning, Sheldon.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, trustees. As always, appreciate the opportunity. For the Safety Minute today, I chose fire safety. As we look around the state, there are a number of wildfires that are burning. To highlight a couple, we have one, the Abbott fire in Duchesne is only about 60% contained. We have one in Mountain Home that's only around 50% contained. Overnight, there were some new fires. There were 8 brush fires started in Coville, and they believe those were arson. There was a new one in Washington County. They're calling it the Turkey Farm Road Fire. They believe that was started by teenagers lighting off fireworks. The state is in real danger right now. It's been hot and dry. If you look at the 10-day forecast, it's a whole bunch more hot and dry, upper 90s, hundreds for the next 10 days. A week from today starts the Pioneer Day celebration for our state. We expect more fireworks to be used. So if you're going to celebrate the holiday with fireworks, or if you're going to be camping, be extra sure that you're careful and not to start a fire. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sheldon. Appreciate that reminder. We have one item on our consent agenda, which is approval of our minutes from July the 1st.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
A motion from Beth, seconded from Kent. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. With that, we'll go to our agency report and welcome our Executive Director, Carolyn Goodall. Good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning. Just one item I just want to talk about, and that is that UTA and the Committee for Accessible Transportation are looking forward to celebrating the 30th anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act, or what you know as ADA, which was signed into law on July 26, 1990. And to celebrate, we have a number of virtual events and activities that have been planned. One of those is a UTA book club. UTA's put together a virtual book club, and they're reading a book, Riding the Bus with My Sister by Rachel Simon. This memoir tells the story of a woman's bond with her sister who has an intellectual disability as they spend time together riding the fixed route buses in the city of Reading, Pennsylvania. We also have a Disabled Rights Action Committee event where UTA is sponsoring that Committee 88 celebration event on July 25th at 1 p.m. on Facebook Live, where UTA ADA Compliance Officer Teresa Aldridge will be presenting alongside with community members. Another event is the virtual screening event. The evening of July 25th at 5:30 p.m., UTA has partnered with the Disabled Rights Action Committee to host a virtual screening of the documentary Crip Camp, A Disability Revolution, and that's an award-winning documentary that follows the journey of a group of teens with disabilities. And then the UTA celebration event we will have is on July 27th at 3 p.m. and UTA is hosting our virtual ADA celebration event with special guest Rachel Simon, the author of Riding the Bus with My Sister, and she'll be discussing her book with the group. So we encourage anyone to attend, and we just want to just recognize the 30th anniversary of this very important piece of legislation.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. Any questions for Carolyn?
Not a question, just a comment. I really am so excited to see how the community can engage in the disability. I think so. I've been reading the book. I'm not very far along, but I'm just so amazed at all the interconnectivity, and I just wanted to thank everyone for all their efforts in doing this.
Yeah, I do want to thank the staff. They've put a good program together. Both Teresa Aldridge and community relations, communications, whole group has been sort of advertising this. So I'm really happy that they're moving forward with it.
Yeah, they've done a really good job, and to be commended for this, even under trying circumstances, they're at least acknowledging the anniversary and making a good time of it. So my congratulations to the whole group.
I echo the comments and look forward to participating in some of those activities you outlined. Thank you, Carolyn, to you and your staff for having a good reminder of this important event. We'll move on to Carolyn, I assume that was the end of the agency report, correct?
Correct. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you. Sorry about that. We'll move on then to contracts, disbursements, and grants. And our first item up is lawn care and landscape services with Acer Landscape Management and LLC and Yard Butler. And with that, I'll turn to Eddie Cummins. Eddie, good morning.
Good morning. So this is a contract with Acer Landscape Management LLC and the Yard Butler. This is a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options. The cost per year is $121,082 with a 5-year total cost of $605,412. The scope of this contract is to provide lawn care service during spring, summer, and fall months, and also includes spring and fall cleanup, lawn aeration, fertilization, weed control, shrub trimming as needed. Combined, Acer Landscape Management LLC and the Yard Butler will provide lawn care and landscaping services for 29 properties. Acer Landscaping Management will have responsibility for 21 of those properties. The cost per year with Acer is $105,493 with a total 5-year cost of $527,464. The Yard Butler will have responsibility for the remaining 8 properties, and the cost per year of their portion of the contract is $15,590 with a total 5-year cost of $77,948. Are there any questions regarding this contract?
Eddie, I did have one question, and that is, how did they bid it? Did they bid it on a like a per sort of site basis, or is it a square foot? And if you have additional properties, you have to go back out to bid it, or is there some provision to expand their service if desired?
Yeah, they bid it out based on the properties and the property size. This is mostly focused on our park and ride lots throughout our area, all those areas that have grass and landscaping. That's what it is, and it is just for these properties. Obviously, if we added anything, we would have to do an amendment to the contract. But we do have some employees on staff that we keep busy through the summer months. We use those employees a lot of times during the winter for emergency snow removal, things of that nature. So we have some employees, so anything that pops up that's a little bit extra, we can take care of that.
Eddie, these properties are scattered all over our service area. What kind of oversight do we have to make sure that these properties are properly taken care of?
So the project manager for this, Kevin Anderson, who's over facilities, he and his crew are out in these areas all the time and monitoring, making sure that they're meeting the demands of the contract.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Eddie on this contract? If none, I entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I recommend that we approve the contracts as they have been presented for these 2 companies to care for 29 properties.
Second.
I have a motion and from Kent, seconded by Beth. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Eddie. Our next contract up is our annual supplier agreement for bus mobile data computer systems or broadcast microwave services with Dan Harmuth and Kyle. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, trustees. This morning, I also have Kyle Brimley with me. He is our manager that oversees the technology and the communications hardware that's in all the buses and the rail. So if I can't answer any questions, he's here to also answer questions. The agreement before you is a sole source supplier price agreement with Broadcast Microwave Services. They manufacture the Data 911 mobile data computer hardware that's currently in use in our buses. So that's what's before you. Also included is the first task order for 25 MDC hardware for 25 new buses that are arriving this year. And so these need to be installed into the buses before they can be put into service. Also, I wanted to add as a caveat that this task order might be the only task order that we execute on this contract, because we're also have a project on the side to rewrite the CAD AVL MDC system. And that project is moving along as scheduled, and we may be ready next year to actually do a proof of concept and actually purchase tablets for the new system that would be going into new buses that we see next year. So that may happen at the beginning of next year. It may be more towards the middle of next year. So I just want to let you know that we may not execute the entire estimated amount of this agreement. So with that, any questions you may have?
One question I had for you, Dan, was, and I understand the sole source because that's what we're currently using in our, and you are phasing it out to go into a different system. As you look to a new system, will you be dependent on a sole source again, or will you have some flexibility on the, whatever the microprocessing unit is?
We will be using hardware that will be able to be purchased from either Utah state contracts or also be able to source from various different vendors. So we're not looking at proprietary hardware in the new system. So, or we will have state contracts to leverage.
Okay.
And also the cost of the hardware in the newer systems is going to be half or a third of the cost of these systems.
I was intrigued that you're going to a tablet. Those things have pretty good processors. Are they considerably better than what we're currently using then?
Yes, they are. They have better processors, better screens, and they're a lot cheaper. We could switch them out easier, and there's a lot of things built into the tablets, whether it be GPS or other functions that will make the experience for the bus operators better, but also provide data into our back-end systems faster to us, which will also improve our passenger information as well.
Great. Any questions for Dan on this contract?
Dan, I had a question. I am just curious, and I don't know if this is applicable because it sounds like what we're going to would be interchangeable, but we have different buses, different manufacturers, certainly different propulsion systems, which makes some changes to maybe some of the layout. Does that impact it in any way? And this is probably a broader question, but I'm just wondering if when we're installing these types of service, is there any particular manufacturer that's one better than the other, or is this just kind of pretty standard?
Right now, we're looking at the 10-inch Android tablets, either by Samsung or by Panasonic Toughbook. There's a myriad of other, if we were to receive a vehicle and the 10-inch tablet is not adequate or it's not right, we can put in most any other Android tablets that we want to, because the system will run on that. So we're not dependent on makes and models of the tablets. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. That's helpful.
Any other questions for Dan? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on this particular contract.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the annual supplier agreement for the bus mobile data computer systems, the broadcast microwave services as presented.
Second.
I have a motion from Beth, seconded by Kent. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much.
Good luck in the new transition as well. So,
Thank you.
next item up is a grant agreement with the Federal Transit Administration for fiscal year 19 Transit-Oriented Development TOD Planning Grant Awards for UTA corridors at South Utah County, Frontrunner, and Point of the Mountain. With that, we'll turn to our Chief Service Officer, Mary De Loreto. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning. Yes, UTA was recently awarded 2 FTA grants for transit-oriented development planning. The intent of this grant program is to fund comprehensive planning work that integrates land use and transportation planning associated with projects that could be eligible for FTA's Capital Improvement Grant Program, their CIG program. And these include new fixed skyway projects and core capacity improvement projects. The first grant is for $250,000 for the South Utah County Frontrunner Station area plans. Several nodes along the UTA-owned corridor from Provo to Payson have been identified by area cities and the MPO, Mountain Land Association of Governments, as transit critical. And as part of the grant effort, a market analysis and community-led visioning to develop station area plans will be conducted. This effort is going to be coordinated closely with the South Utah County Transit Analysis, which will be starting later this summer or early fall. And that transit analysis is going to explore transit modes, alignments, and station locations in the corridor region. And then the TOD effort will build on those station areas identified. The second grant for $275,000 will be a similar effort, but this one's going to focus on the UTA-owned corridor from Draper to Lehigh, and will be coordinated closely with the Point of the Mountain transit study that is currently underway. Staff is requesting that UTA Board approve the acceptance of these 2 federal grants and authorize the Executive Director to execute those grants with FTA. Any questions?
No question, just a comment. I know that there has been a lot of discussion about planning and how planning looks, and there's dialogue as to what will that look like long term. And I'm really excited that we are having an opportunity to again look at our system strategically, so that when we are in a place where our growth has gotten to where it needs to be to kind of lift and elevate these types of projects, that will be ready and prepared. I think that the planning portions of these are really, really critical, and that we need to continue to do that moving forward as we look at our system. And we know that we're still providing existing service, and that's also part of this dialogue. But I think it's really critical that we plan. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Mary? Seeing none, it looks like Kent, you're ready to make a motion. Is that?
I'm anxious to make a motion because both of these impact the area that I represent. So I make a motion that we approve receipt of the Federal Transit Administration Transit-Oriented Development Planning Grant Awards for the South County Frontrunner Study and the Point of the Mountain Study, and authorize the Executive Director to sign for these grants.
I will second.
I have a motion from Kent, seconded by Beth. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Mary, on that one. That brings us to item number 6, which is a discussion item. And the first item up is our South Salt Lake County Micro Transit Pilot Quarterly Report. And we appreciate this group for coming back. We had them scheduled for our last meeting and just kind of ran short on time. So with that, I'll turn to Nicole Bordeaux, and as well as Jaron Robertson and Shayna Quinn. Good morning, Nicole.
Good morning. Thank you, trustee. And we don't mind coming back. So thank you, Chair. We are here today to talk about the second quarter microtransit report. And so we're just going to give you a summary and review of our quarterly report. Jaron and Shayna are here to talk about the March, April, and May numbers and data. Also, we're going to give you a summary of what we've done for the COVID safety and security during that time and how we've handled that for VIA. We're also, Shayna's here to give you kind of an assessment of what we wanted to do and do kind of a modeling of what if we continued the path of the first quarterly ridership and data and kind of look at what that trend would look like if we continued under a pre-COVID structure. So we wanted to give you that kind of assessment as well. And then we're going to look at what we are going to model and move forward into the third quarter, and then how we finish this pilot out and our next steps. So I'm going to turn the time over to Jaron, kind of go through this quarterly report, and we're half year through, and then answer any questions that you all may have and move on from there. So thank you. Jaron?
Great. Thank you, Nicole, and good morning, trustees. If you'll advance the slide, please, quickly, we'll get right into this. This is just a quick reminder of our goals and objectives for the pilot. I won't spend much time here as I want to get into, first and foremost, COVID-19 in that situation. So if you'll advance the slide one more time, let's talk about COVID-19. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody that we did see a pretty significant decline in ridership due to COVID-19, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And much with the rest of UTA, we've improved our cleaning and safety procedures with the service itself. A couple things that we have done is we have implemented daily cleaning and disinfecting of all the vehicles. We do have automatic opening of all the doors on the vehicles. We are, for several months now, we've been providing masks to drivers and riders. We also installed partitions in the front of the vehicle between the driver and our customers. Those are fully implemented. And then we were able to reduce actually the maximum passengers allowed in the vehicle from 6 to 3. So we've limited sharing in the vehicles. And then we've asked our customers actually to sit in the furthest seat of the vehicle. And so we were able to quickly adjust and improve our safety cleaning procedures in partnership with VIA. Additionally, we saw some shifts and trends, and we'll talk about this more, of how our customers use the service. First quarter, we saw a majority of our trips being used as first and last mile connections to our rail stations. Second quarter, we saw a lot of just intra-local trips, whether customers were using them to go to a grocery store or a doctor's office, or whatever reason. We saw that a lot of our customers were staying within the service area itself. That doesn't mean that changed. We still did see some significant trips to our rail stations, but that majority of them stayed within the service area. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more. In addition to, this service is just so dynamic and so fun. We were able to make quick adjustments to the service. So as we saw ridership decline, we were actually quickly able to reduce vehicle supply, which what that means for us is cost savings. And on top of that, we didn't have to reduce service quality of the service. So we were able to maintain a good quality of service for our customers, but yet save costs and really right-size supply for the service for what the demand was when ridership was in there, or sorry, when what ridership was asking for, or riders needed. So that was a really neat thing we have about service. We did suspend all marketing and promotion efforts as well during this second quarter. I will say we have sent out some safety messages to our customers, but as far as trying to promote and market service, that has been suspended. Additionally, real quick too, in partnership with VIA during COVID-19, we actually were able to prepare and plan for how can we adapt the service should the community need different response due to COVID-19. So if we saw a giant demand for maybe doctors needing to be able to go to medical locations, or was there a need to transport medical supplies? We could have made some very quick changes to the service, and we kind of mapped that out with VIA. Fortunately, that wasn't something we ever needed to implement. And so for all intents and purposes, we just continued to provide the service to our customers just at a reduced level. And that's kind of the impact we've seen from COVID-19. And we can probably talk about next steps, but during the second quarter, some of the biggest impacts is that you would have seen and the changes we made.
Hey, Darren, question for you, and I'm sure you'll get to the point. Do you have a sense of were most of your riders accessing it through the app, or did a lot call the operator to arrange a ride? It kind of gives me a sense of age of who's riding it. So,
yeah, Trustee, majority of our customers are using the app. We see, and I apologize, I'll have to give the numbers. I don't have them right off the top of my head, but what we see is the majority of our customers who require a wheelchair accessible vehicle, they are calling in and having VIA dispatch the service for them. But just the general population, the majority of them are using the app. And in fact, I'll just skip ahead to one part. What's been exciting is we have had, since the launch of the service, we've had over 6,000 downloads of the VIA app so far. And so a lot of interest, and again, the use of the app is really the primary way for people to access the service. I will go ahead and move on unless there's any other questions regarding the COVID-19. Okay. Quickly, as Nicole mentioned, we are going to talk about our goals and objectives and what if COVID-19 happened. But it's important we do look at what happened with ridership during COVID-19. As this is a pilot, it really didn't make sense for us to go and change our goals and objectives, but it also made it very difficult for us to measure up to these goals and objectives for a pilot. So you can see our quarter one performance. We were just about at 20,000 total riders, and that dropped pretty significantly due to COVID-19. In fact, March, we saw our all-time record high of 505 daily trips, and literally the week after COVID-19 hit, and we saw about a 62% decline in ridership. That number started to rise. By May, we'd seen an 18% increase. And in June, actually jumping ahead a little bit, we saw 31% in ridership. So it did start to bounce back a little bit, but COVID-19 still continues to impact daily ridership right now. One of the exciting things, though, is wave usage. Our wheelchair accessible vehicles, while that dropped initially in April, we started to see a pretty good increase in that. And so May, we actually hit an all-time high ridership of 104 trips. And in June, and I know we're not talking about June, but June, we saw even higher ridership usage. So it's exciting that we're able to provide the service to people with disabilities, because it's really a game changer for them. And in fact, some of the best comments we received about the service is how we're really improving the quality of life for people by access to wheelchair accessible vehicles that just wasn't available before. So both our utilization and our shared rides have really gone down. And again, those are due to some of the parameters that we changed by reducing the amount of people who can be in one vehicle. And so we had done very well in the first quarter, but that did take a pretty significant decline into that. Additionally, our cost per rider is basically just a function of ridership. And so we do pay a fixed cost for the service, but as ridership declines, that cost per rider does continue to increase. And so we set a goal of $13.08 for this rider, or for this pilot, and that was based upon current costs of services in the service area, and we wanted to reduce the cost by 20%. And so we were on track. Quarter one is cumulative of the first 3 months, but really, if you looked at February, right before COVID, our cost per rider was $15.54. So we were very much headed in the right direction, but unfortunately, as ridership declined, those costs go up. I will tell you, May, as ridership's gone up, is continuing to improve, and we're in the $33 per hour, or sorry, $33 cost per rider range at this point in time. Just quickly, additionally, on that cost per rider, it is fully inclusive, which is not the same as the way we calculate cost per rider here at UTA. In fact, we use investment per rider. which does subtract fares and then looks at the operational costs and riders. This does include all capital costs and operation costs for that. And finally, just to quickly note, we were able to, as I mentioned, as we reduced supply in vehicles, we were able to find pretty significant cost savings. And so you can see for the quarter, we're about $100,000 under budget on the pilot. And that's not including capital expenses. That's not including marketing expenses. That's just operational costs. So if you'll advance the slide, I'll just quickly show you a graph of what we saw in ridership. As you can see, we were doing very well as we saw that trending starting to include towards that 500 riders per day, but you can see right where COVID-19 happened. And it's held steady, but we are seeing a little bit of increase, fluctuating between 150 to 200 riders per day at this point. So with that, if you don't have any questions, I would like to quickly turn the time over to Shana. She's a researcher in the Innovative Solutions Department, and I really want to thank her for the work on this. We would never have been to where we're at without the great work she puts in on this project every single day. So
maybe I could ask one question before we go to Shana. I mean, we called this a pilot program. Is there any I assume we're interested in continuing it, and it really hasn't had its fair test, if you will, as a pilot. And most goals seem to be reaching, but what's the discussion or thought on how it continues on or moves forward?
And Trustee, I think, we had set various goals and objectives to really monitor and measure and look at the effectiveness of the service during the course of the 12-month pilot. We launched last November, intending to go to this November, and really we missed out on some of that opportunity. So we're really looking at that first quarter data at this point. And again, Shana's going to look at projecting that out to the second quarter, which it shows very quickly we had a lot of success with the service, and that we believe we would have continued to have a lot of success with the service. And so I think we really, as we look at major service changes throughout the agency in response to COVID-19, I think that there's some real value in saying that this is a service we want to consider continuing on because it's meeting the goals and objectives we've set out. So we are working with planning, and we will have a good, solid recommendation for this group. But overall, I think that we've shown in a very short period of time that this is a viable service that meets the needs of this community and works as a coverage-based model.
Hey, Darren, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Chair.
No.
I had a question and a comment. Most of that you just answered, but one of the comments I wanted to make really quick is, so my brother lives in Riverton area, so within the geofenced area, and he was, anecdotally, he was really impressed with the service, and he had a brain tumor, and so it infected his vision, so he's not able to drive any longer, and he thought that this was one of the most amazing components to getting access to throughout the entire system. So that anecdotally, that holds, I think, with what you've heard from other people with some challenges as well. I did have a question though, and maybe it's a question comment. We have had anecdotal requests and discussions, not just within the South Salt Lake County areas, but in other areas of our service as well. And I know that there's been some discussion about implementing some of this, not just within the pilot area, but also within other areas. And I know that that might be part of the long-term strategy. Do you guys have any sense of how that would integrate as a what would be the baseline for a cost per rider and other components to that? Or is that just we're still in the pilot and that's probably not quite fleshed out?
Those are great questions. Oh, sorry, Nicole.
I was going to just comment on that a little bit to Trustee Carlton's question as well. I think moving forward, Trustee Holbrook, we're in the phase of investigation as well as how we implement microtransit on agency-wide. So Jaron Roberts, Eric Eric Callison and Laura have put a service agency unit together. They're looking at how we implement service long term, and microtransit is part of that. And so Jaron has been working with VIA along with looking at how we could apply this to lots of other areas. We've done modeling. VIA's just finished a modeling project. It was pre-COVID, so now we have to think about it post-COVID for a lot of different areas. So they're taking that into this service planning group and then applying it to a long 5-year mobility plan. So I think as you see, bring that to you in, I think, September, you'll see how some of these solutions could move forward. But I think taking this pilot and then what Shayna's going to show you in her modeling exercise, we should be able to see how this could be used in other areas. So we're looking at that for long term, and then taking the information we had first quarter, taking the information that we did with the modeling, and then taking that data for the 5-year mobility plan and that service group together. I think they'll be able to see where these kinds of solutions can go long term. And I think Laura's coming up next, and she could probably address that. But I think it's for the 5-year mobility plan. And Jaron, you could probably talk to that service planning group a little bit better than I can.
Thank you.
Should we go to Shayna next? I think I interrupted and we had opportunity for her. So, welcome, Shayna.
No worries. Good morning, trustees, and thanks, Jaron, for getting us this far. Could you please advance the slide? Okay, so as discussed, we didn't want to reset all of the goals that we originally had for the pilot. The goals were set at the 6-month mark because a service like this takes time to ramp up. So we looked at the 4 months of data that we did have, and we made some what-if projections using that historical data and looking at the trends and increases that we were seeing each month. There were 4 primary objectives. The first goal is about average weekday ridership. The goal was 350 to 450 riders. The projections show the service would have been in the range of 450 to 500, meeting that goal. Utilization is the number of passengers per vehicle per hour. The goal was set to be 2.5 to 4.5 people. Of course, you can't have half people, so between 2 and 5 riders. The projections show we would have hit 2.5 to 2.7, so 2 to 3 riders per vehicle per hour. Average wait times, the goal is less than 15 minutes, and the projections show that we would have hit between 12 and 13 minutes to pick up riders, so that goal would have been met as well. The cost per rider goal, as Jaron mentioned, was less than $13.08. The projections show between $12 and $13 with that higher ridership level, again, meeting the target. We also factored in some seasonality because ridership typically is not as strong in the months of April and May as school schedules and our service, we typically see a little dip there. But we believe that using historical data and the performance of the pilot over the first couple of months show that this has solid potential to achieve the original goals. And if you would please project the next slide. Next slide, please. Right, so this is just the linear trend line showing the average daily ridership lifting up to 500 riders per day. We do think that at this fleet size and for this service area, there's a natural boundary of about 600 total rides, but the average weekday ridership, again, would have been between the 400 and 500 rider range. Thanks, and I'll hand it back over to Jaron.
Thanks, Shannon. And I think that last point was really important, that even if we were to make it to this 500, we still have capacity within the system. And it shows out by utilization and what Shannon's shown. So we would probably trend off around the 500, but have room if we see some spikes on some specific days. So thanks again, Shannon. I'll quickly move along. and just talk about some other performance characteristics of the service if you'll advance the slide. I mentioned before we saw some trend changes, but you can still see the top pickup and drop off locations, which even though majority are staying within the zone, you see that our tracks and front stations still are very popular destinations. So there's still those connections to transit. So it really shows that this is a good first and last mile solution for the community. If you'll advance the slide. This is also a chart I think we showed you last time, but it's just a visual of 1 day's ridership, and it's really fun to show how this really changes mobility in the community. You can imagine us trying to make fixed route bus work in something like this. This shows people everywhere in the community using it across, and you can actually point out some of our stations. If you look, you can see our Daybreak, you can see Draper Tracks and South Jordan Frontrunner Station. Another quick point I wanted to talk about is we, over the second quarter, we saw over 1,300 unique pickup and drop-off locations. So really people are able to use the service in such a different way, and it's just changing the way mobility is people have access to mobility in the community. So it's a quick visual that we want to point out. If you'll advance the slide. Quickly, just talking about the customer experience. As part of the experience, customers are asked to rate the quality of their trip through the VIA app. That is on a scale of 1 to 5. We consistently see a 4.8 average. So it really shows that we have a good service we're providing, and that the community is really liking the service. We talked about the average wait time. We've consistently stayed below that goal of 15 minutes. So from when you make a trip request to when the vehicle picks you up, you can see for quarter two, it's about a 10-minute wait. So really high quality of service. And then our average pickup time, we do have a goal of 95%. We're slightly below that. And there's a lot of factors that can impact that. And so we continue to work on that with VIA. But we do have a pretty good service there at 94% for the quarter. Quickly looking at the other aspects of the service for our fare payment, we collect about 22% of fare payment through credit cards, Apple Pay, Google Pay, but the majority of our customers are using some sort of UTA Pass ticket or transfer. And I'm going to talk about that just a little bit more in my final slide, but again, it shows people have our pass products probably, and they can pay for tickets and are using service. Regarding customer comments, if you look at commendations, that's 49%, as you see on the right side of that pie chart. So the majority of our customers who leave a comment either through the UTA's customer service department, the VIA app, or can call on the VIA themselves, we're getting good quality comments about the service. That legend just goes clockwise around that graph. So 22% have something to do with routing, which may mean that they maybe have been dropped off on the wrong side of the road, or some other issue with how the vehicle was routed. We do see some driving habit comments at 14%. There's customer service interaction, 11%. And then we have level of service, which may be, I wish this service was in a different community. I wish you ran on Saturdays, or maybe it's later at night. So we get some comments, and then just other comments of about 1%. If you'll advance the slide. Just as a reminder, we are continuing to watch the flex routes in the service area. We have 5 routes that we've been watching that operate within the service area. Just like everything else with COVID-19, we saw some pretty significant impacts to those routes, which has made it really more difficult to understand if we're seeing a trend or change from flex routes to the microtransit service. During the second quarter, we still saw a greater ridership level on microtransit than we did on the flex routes. And so we saw, again, about 11,000 trips compared to about 8,000 trips on the flex route service. And so we're continuing to watch how that performs, and hopefully we'll get a chance to go out and work with our customers who are riding that service to get a better understanding of the microtransit service during this next quarter.
Sharon, is there any thought to discontinuing the flex routes? And I don't know if they're in this service adjustments, with having this option continue.
Yeah, so that is something we are continuing to evaluate. One of the biggest aspects of those flex routes right now are helping some of our paratransit customers connect in the paratransit service. And so we were working pretty extensively with VIA to see if we can have the VIA service and make those connections between the paratransit service. So our paratransit team has been very helpful. We're working on solutions both through the technology itself and then logistically and how we make these services line up. We've been testing these connections, not with actual customers, but just between the vehicles over the course of the last quarter. And we made improvements, but we're really trying to make sure that we have a good connection between the service so that we're not diminishing the customer experience and providing a poor quality for the disabled community. We're using the flex routes to connect to paratransit. And so I anticipate by next quarter, we should have a solution in place so that we can make these connections. And then I think that the possibility of discontinuing these routes is much more likely, and transitioning the remainder of the customers onto the VIA service.
And that would be, Jared, in a proposal like the April change day or in 2021, right? Is that what we're anticipating once that test would be looked at?
So no, we anticipate by between actually in quarter 3, we should have a full solution implemented and testing for these connections. And so ideally, when we stood up the service, the idea was to run it for a full year, which put us in between, put us at basically the November change day. And so really decisions would have to be made very quickly if we were going to act sooner than later. Understandably that everything's changed and we are now looking at service in general. And so we're working with, as Nicole mentioned, the planning department and really looking at how service will be deployed in the November change day and April change day. And so I think this is something that is on the table for us for discussions, because if we're going to continue the microtransit pilot or service, it really doesn't make sense for us to continue running the flex routes as we do today. So I think, Trustee, in answer to your question, yes, I think these are on the table for looking at different ways and either discontinue or reallocating these resources to this.
Thank you.
I think I just have one more slide quickly, if you'll advance. And so in conclusion, trustees, as mentioned, any changes to the pilot we deemed necessary were made during the COVID-19 process over the past quarter. Outside of that, there's no significant changes that we need to implement for change at this point. The service is performing well under the current situation, and we continue to receive good comments and feedback about the service. As mentioned too, we are continuing safety campaigns with customers. We'll also be implementing a customer survey early August to get better feedback from customers. We talked about already the paratransit and microtransit connections. That's a big objective for us that we hopefully will have that solution in place next quarter. But I also want to mention quickly that we have already partnered with VIA to find a way to integrate our EFC products into the VIA app. So that allows us to actually validate fares right there in the VIA app. So no hardware on the vehicles. And really, it's just a great customer experience, because we saw 70% of all of our fares are EFC or a ticket, and we are doing visual validation. So we're missing out on a lot of data and fare validation. So this is a great step for us and our customers to be able to validate these products. And so we anticipate launching that during, it should be towards the end of quarter 3 that's launched for customers. And finally, too, we are working with VIA, our capital development department, and Rocky Mountain Power to look at really how the future of microtransit can incorporate electric vehicles. We all know air quality issues we have in this community, and this would be a great advancement for these types of services. So we are continuing to look at that. And finally, as we continue to pilot, we have another quarter to continue to evaluate and look for service improvements. So with that, that would conclude our presentation. And so we can quickly answer any questions you may have.
Are there any final questions for Nicole, Jaren, or Shayna? I'm not seeing any.
Not a question. Just I wanted to say thanks for your presentation. I thought that this is such valuable information. And as we look at our expanded service area at some point, I think that there's a lot of potential for this. And so I'm excited with the changes and the steps that you're taking. I think the electric vehicle is a great idea. The electronic fare capture data, probably even better. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks again for letting us reschedule you. And glad to have the report. So thanks, and have a great day. Just a reminder. I think we'll go on to item B, and then we'll take unless there's objections, we'll take a short break between B and C. But let's go forward with item B, which is the August 2020 change day plan overview. And with that, we have Mary Delaretto back, and as well as Laura Hanson, our Director of Planning.
Hi, Laura Hanson is going to be leading this, so I'm just going to turn it over to her. She's our planning director.
Sounds great. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mary. I also have Eric Callison here to answer all the hard questions, if you have any. He's always a wizard with these things. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we have 3 change days a year, and typically August, December, and April. And so August 2020 is our next big service change day. As you know, we reduced our service fairly significantly in response to the COVID pandemic. We wanted to minimize exposure for our operators, match up our service with declining demand, and also ensure that we were in a solid financial position, and that we had enough operators to continue to provide the service, knowing that the future of the pandemic was somewhat uncertain. So we cut our service quite a bit back. August is an exciting change day for us because we are bringing a lot of that service back. We're following the economy as it is opening up, and we know that people rely on public transit, and so we are bringing a large amount of service back onto the street, which I think will help keep things moving, but also ensure that we have enough space on our vehicles to ensure adequate social distancing. As we were putting together the plan for August 2020, we established a few rules at the beginning of this to help us guide our decision making. The first of which was to stay within budget. Since sales tax revenue has declined, we wanted to make sure that we were not overextending UTA and we would be able to continue to provide the service that we're bringing back. And so we established a target budget for the service. We wanted to stay within that. We also said, let's try not to restore any service that we think might go away in the future. The markets are changing. Some people are telecommuting more and may continue to telecommute more. And so we've been watching what the market is doing, which routes are seeing strong ridership and which are declining. And so in some cases, we thought, well, maybe there's a better way that we can serve some of these areas in the future. And so we didn't want to necessarily bring back service that we think we might be able to serve an area in a better way in the future. We wanted to also find ways that we could solve some operational problems and improve the customer experience. One of the things that we hear from the public oftentimes is that we don't have enough midday service. We've got great service in the peak, but if your plans change in the middle of the day, getting back home or to a repair shop or something in the middle of the day is challenging. And so more midday service is something our customers have been asking for. And then because we've had such peak heavy service, it creates a situation where our operators work 2 split shifts. So they'll come in the morning for a couple of hours, then they'll have some time off in the middle of the day, and then they'll work the second half of their shift in the evening peak. And so that creates, some challenges, and it's hard to keep people employed and find folks who like a schedule like that. And so we're seeking some opportunities to improve some of those situations. The other thing that the final kind of rule that we looked at was let's make sure that we're designing a system that operates as a network of services rather than a collection of individual routes. So we're looking system-wide. This is a holistic look at our service network in a new way that we've ever done before. We want to make sure it's reliable, safe, efficient, easy to use, easy to navigate. Again, tracking current data and future market trends, and then making sure that we're not leaving anyone behind, in particular, low-income, minority populations or those with disabilities. If you could go to the next slide, please. So in this August 2020 plan, we've accomplished a lot of really great things. Kudos to our service planning team who's worked so hard on this. They really were creative and found some really wonderful solutions as they were putting this together. We have improved track service and front runner service on weekdays, so we're bringing that back. We had a situation where our tracks trains on weekends and our bus system, their schedules didn't match up. So tracks was on 20-minute schedules and the bus routes were on 15 or 30-minute schedules. And so we've aligned those so that there's easier transfers from bus to rail. We had some operational challenges where we were trying to find an appropriate place and time for certain bus lines to have their end of line and their relief, which resulted in some deadhead costs. That is time where a bus has to travel without any passengers just to get to the garage or to a relief point. And so we were able to solve some of those. And an example is Route 612 in Ogden. We've expanded spans to improve operator working conditions to get more straight shifts. I mentioned the splits. This gives people the ability to work a straight 8-hour or 10-hour shift. And we've done that on Route 72, 201, and 509. And we've made some incremental changes that advance a long-term goal. One route is Route 616 in North Ogden, which is a very long route, and half of the route really accounts for the vast majority of the ridership. The other half of the route just really doesn't see a whole lot. And so we have increased the span or the frequency on the lower half of the route and kept the top half of the route at 30 minutes, making it more efficient and really matching it up better with the market and those that are riding. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we put together a planning target budget at the beginning of this to make sure that we were staying within what we think we can realistically afford. We don't want to have to do a yo-yo and put service back and then pull it away and then put service back and pull it away. So our target budget was $135 million. That was for our entire service area, all of our modes from front runner to paratransit and bus and everything in between. We set aside a 2.5% contingency right off the top of that. Typically, when we get into actually planning the routes in the most detailed level, where we're creating the operator blocks and the run cuts, sometimes we'll find that, okay, we actually need one more bus or we need one more operator to really effectively operate the service. And so sometimes that takes more cost. And so this contingency allows us to address some of those concerns if they come up. We set aside 15% right off the top for complimentary paratransit service to meet our federal obligation there and also make sure that we're taking care of our riders that depend on us the most. Overall, the service plan for August 2020 comes in at $129 million. And we are bringing back 91% of the pre-COVID service. So this should be, for our customers and the public, they should really see a big jump in the amount of service that's available to them starting August 23rd. And you can see a lot of that is on weekends. We're really bringing a lot of weekend service back, and we're pretty close on weekday service. Our next step really is to continue to watch the data. Let's continue to track which routes are receiving high ridership, where loads are meeting our thresholds for social distancing, where we're receiving customer comments saying, you know, I really wish we had a little bit more service here. We'll be tracking all of that, and we'll be tracking our commuter routes to see when people start coming back to the office and at what rates that they'll be coming back. We have the flexibility to add some additional service. if we see some of those routes really getting a big demand and a big load. So we'll continue to watch that. Again, we want to be really cautious and put service back that we know is going to be successful and know that we know we can continue. So that's kind of our thought process there. Next slide, please. And this is a summary, just a little graphic of the routes that we are bringing back and some that are being held. So you'll see that there are a number of routes that we've improved beyond pre-COVID levels. These will have longer span of hours, more frequency, and better service than we ever had even before the pandemic. You'll see a lengthy list of routes there that we're restoring to our pre-COVID levels. And so that really makes up this bringing back 91% of the service. I think our customers will really see a big improvement there. We are bringing back some of our routes, 612, 626, 627, and our rail services back to partial restoration. Those will continue to have the same span that they were before, but maybe at a little bit lower frequency. Just watching the data again, and we'll bring those back as the markets demand. We have a few routes that are being held at reduced levels, or some that have been suspended until alternatives are determined. The majority of these are really typical commuter routes, kind of the briefcase commuter group that have been slow to return to transit thus far. So we'll continue to watch those and see when people start when we start seeing more demand on those, we can bring them back as is. And then some alternatives we think we may be able to solve in a new way. We're looking at kind of exploring some new roles for our flex services, exploring new roles for microtransit, and it's great to follow Jaren's presentation. We think there's a lot of opportunity for us to explore some creative ways and see if we can serve different areas in a more effective way, provide a higher quality of transit service to our customers through some different ways. One notable item that I wanted to bring up on the suspend until alternatives are determined list is the 35M. This is the MAX line in West Valley City. It looks like we're suspending that. What we're actually doing is combining that with the existing Route 35. And so our goal is to have 12-minute frequency on 35th South, and we will call it still the MAX. So we're not doing away with that. We're just combining those two routes into a single service, maybe adding some additional bus stops to better meet the existing demands and continue that on at a higher level of frequency than it had before. And I believe that is my last slide. Do you have any questions that I can answer for you?
So this is, oh,
This is Carolyn.
sorry, just a minute.
We'll give Carolyn a second to figure out her audio. Maybe Laura, and I know that, we're scheduled to take action next week as far as final action. Certainly welcome any public comments in the interim.
Oh, yes, thank you. There is one more slide that has public comment information. Oh. Yes, thank you for that reminder.
So just, am I back now?
You are. Go ahead, Carolyn.
I was echoing. I was trying to fix that. I just want to let you know that a lot of this work that Laura and the team have done has been based off of sort of looking at the recovery task force and trying to make sure that whatever service we bring back is sustainable and based on sort of where the revenues are. Her team's done a great job in staying within the budget and bringing back a lot of the service. And we'll continue to look at the service as it goes forward. But I think what's really important to us is that what we do bring back is sustainable, and we're gauging, with the schools reopening, particularly the universities, and other activities starting to reopen, but we'll keep an eye on it. So just to let you know, that is really sort of the viewpoint that we sort of had in mind. And the other thing I want Laura to maybe touch base on, or Eric, is what we're seeing on these routes where we're increasing the pre-COVID levels. They seem to be very strong routes in terms of serving essential services. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, or?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And Eric, do you want to jump in, Eric, and just describe some of these routes?
Sure. We've been monitoring ridership on a daily basis throughout the COVID emergency, and these are some of the routes that have maintained a relatively stronger ridership compared to the system as a whole. They're still not operating at their pre-COVID levels of ridership, but we're seeing higher loads and more passengers on these routes than many of the other routes. Not all of these routes were not the most successful routes pre-COVID, but some of them have definitely moved up kind of in the ranking, because we see more passengers making essential trips, more people needing to make trips outside of a normal 9-to-5 schedule. And so we'll be making improvements to those routes, and we'll continue to monitor all of the other routes as well for improvements. But these are some of the ones that we've seen have been consistent throughout even the COVID quarantine situation and all the other things that have happened.
One question I had, and maybe Eric or Laura, you can comment on it. I was a little surprised, and I'm far from having all these routes memorized, but the one that kind of stood out to me was the 2X, and I know sort of pre-COVID that was generally pretty full heading up to university, and with the university opening again, I just wondered if you could speak to sort of how you determined why not restoring that one with the university.
Sure. That's one of the routes that we will be watching, but we will be putting Route 2 back to 15-minute service starting in August, as well as Route 6 that also makes the connection between Salt Lake Central and the U of U. So we will just be monitoring that. We felt like it was better to not offer the 2X right away and keep it waiting in the wings than to offer it and then realize that we didn't have the demand for it, and then be in a position where we'd have to, as Laura was saying, kind of seesaw back and forth with the service. So we'll be monitoring the situation on 200 South, and if we feel like we need that extra service, then we've still got it in our pocket. We have that contingency budget that we can use to make those adjustments.
A similar situation exists on Route 205. Some of these routes we've said, okay, is this market being served with other routes that we're bringing back? So the 205 runs on 5th East. We have the 209 on 9th East, and we have the 200 on State Street, which is a reasonable distance. If you're on the 205, you can meet your transit needs with these other two routes. And so the 2X is like that, where we have the 2 and the 6, and we have some other parallel services that meet that same kind of origin destination trip. And so we're being, again, cautious and bringing back what we think we have demand for to meet the basic trips there, and then we'll just continue to watch and bring others back as we need them.
Eric or Laura, I had a question. You mentioned in your presentation earlier, Laura, that some of the service that hit the midday was there was an unexpected desire to have more midday service. Which routes, and is that going to be detailed for people to see, have that improvement and or that change?
I think most of those tie back to these improved beyond COVID, pre-COVID level routes on the very far left side of your screen. These are really, as Carolyn mentioned, geared towards, they're serving essential workers. They serve service industries, and those jobs typically have shifts, where you may start or end in the middle of the day. And so we really saw a lot of midday demand on 217 on Redwood Road, for example, the 3335 on 33 and 3500 South. 850 is another one in Utah County, where we're seeing a lot of midday service requests as well. Eric, do you have anything else to add?
Just to note that UTA we've seen a shift in travel patterns away from kind of the two peaks in the morning and the evening to more of a one large bump in the middle of the day, if that makes sense. Some of the people that we're working with at UDOT have also kind of noted that their travel patterns seem to be less peaky They're not seeing as big of a morning and afternoon rush hour. It is more of a constant demand through the day. And I think a lot of that does have to do with the office workers, like Laura said before, briefcase commuters are not traveling the same way that they were before. And so we're seeing more of a constant demand throughout the day that supports increasing the midday service on some of these routes that we've seen higher ridership loads on.
I think also what's important to also notice is that the budget, even though we didn't say sort of what the original budget was, the budget that Laura and her team were working within is lower than the budget we had anticipated for the year overall. So that's already somewhat lower. And they've been able to bring back quite a bit of the service within that because some of the service that we're holding at the reduced levels or suspending has been, I'm not going to say like the 2X or whatever, we're going to keep a lookout, but some of it has not been as productive and it's a costly service. And so we're continuing to take a look at that to try to bring back the service where we know there's a lot more demand for that kind of service at this point. But I'm really impressed with the amount of service they were able to bring back with the budget constrained and allowing for some contingency in case we need to see higher levels of ridership or we need to bring back some of these other routes that are either reduced or suspended at this time.
Any other questions for Laura or Eric?
I just had one other question about, so I'm assuming that you're going to be pushing out all of the data for public comment. Could you maybe just articulate what that looks like, just for the sake of letting everyone know?
Well, I think what we have here is our, we're welcome to receive public comments. People can reach out to us through social media, calling our customer service line or sending an email. We receive all of those comments and we look at that. In terms of the data behind this, I think what we're proposing to share is just the proposed service changes. We're not taking anything away at this point that hasn't already been suspended. We're just simply bringing back existing service that we had prior. And so I think our customers will really see that as a positive thing. I anticipate that some may want to see even more service come back, and we have a plan, and we're working on developing plans to bring even more back in the next coming change days. But we'd love to see public input and make sure that we're bringing back the right routes at the right levels. We'll be publishing on our website proposed schedules for all of these service changes, just like we do for any other service change. And so people will be able to plan their own personal routes and see how the new service meets their schedules. And so it will be similar and typical to our regular change day process. Thank you.
How long will you look at some of those routes before you make additional changes? For example, the 2X, how long would you look at that? A week or two, a month before you make a change? And not only to add back some things that you're not adding now, but perhaps adjusting back down some things that you've added that may not really need to be added.
Well, Trustee, thank you. Those are good questions. We've been really careful to not bring back service that we think we might not need in the future. If there was any doubt whether or not it would be needed and productive, we decided to hold on that service. So it is not our intention to reduce any of these that we're bringing back again. So I think we'll keep all of those in line. We have a dashboard that we've put together, this task force. Beth Waverick's done a really tremendous job putting together a load dashboard where we're watching every single day to see what the load is on individual routes. We've set a threshold where if we see a consistent load above a certain number of people on a vehicle, that we then consider adding additional service. If it's just a random trip here or there, we will continue to watch it until we see a consistent load above that threshold. So, there's not necessarily a time frame associated to it. It's more on a route by route basis where we're watching them and evaluating each one individually based on who's riding. I want to give kudos to our operations planners that have been incredibly flexible during this last period of uncertainty and quick changes and a little bit of unknowns. They have been very flexible in doing their work very quickly. And so although we try to stick with our main change days for bringing service back, if we see a route that is having consistent loads above the threshold that we think is safe for social distancing, we can bring service back in between change days during this uncertain time as needed. And so we'll be responsive to that. It doesn't mean that it needs to wait until December for the next change.
We have a working group that consists of myself, Alicia Garrett, and the RGMs that considers the loads on bus routes and on the trains regularly. Meeting once a week. We'll see if we need to continue that meeting schedule. But we do pretty much address these issues as soon as we see a consistent pattern over like a week or two. We'll bring that up.
Great. Any other questions? Laura and Eric and Carolyn and the rest of the team, thank you for your efforts. Eric has taught me a new transit word of the day, which is peaky. I'll have to remember how to utilize that effectively. But it reminds me what talented folks we have in our group. So, thank you for your efforts, and it's nice to bring some service back, and we'll hope that the implementation of it goes well. We'll take a short break until 10:25, and then we'll come back and go to our last discussion item on our BRT projects. So with that, we'll just take a recess for the time being. Thank you. We welcome back everyone from our short break, and that brings us to our next item, which is a discussion on the Utah Transit Authority corridor studies with bus rapid transit alternatives, and there are a number of them that are in the works, and we thought it'd be great to have an update on how these are progressing. With that, we'll start the conversation anyway with Mary Delaredo again, and welcome back, Mary.
Hello. Yeah, as you mentioned, there are a number of studies that we're looking at or projects that are in various stages of development. Can I have the next slide, please? So there's 7 that we're going to talk about today. I just listed them from north to south, and the project managers on each of these projects are also available today. So if you have any detailed questions that I can't answer, I'm going to ask them all to jump in. For each project, you could see we have a lot of we've identified the local partners. We have a lot of local coordination going on here. We're not doing these in a vacuum. We have the support, and oftentimes it starts based on the requests from those local partners. So can I have the next slide, please? So the first project we're going to talk about is the Ogden-Weber State University BRT project, which is a 5.3-mile BRT corridor with 2.2 miles of exclusive lanes. You can see the thicker part of the line there. That's where we have the exclusive lanes. There's 13 stations, and we project the daily ridership to be about 2,500 riders per day, and an additional 5,500 shuttle riders within the Weber State campus. This project would take over that shuttle service as well. During the peak hour, we'd have 10-minute frequencies on this route. Next slide, please. The project begins at the Ogden Intermodal Center, and then it serves Weber State University and the McKay Hospital. It will also, as I mentioned, replace the existing WSU campus shuttle. You can see the partners listed here. We've been working closely with Ogden City, WSU, McKay Hospital, Weber County, Wasatch Front, UDOT, FTA, and currently we're in the final design phase, and pre-construction work is going on. We estimate that to be completed by November of 2020. The next steps would be submitting the Small Starts Grant application to FTA and starting construction work, and we estimate a project opening of 2022. The estimated cost for this project is about $115 million, and we have both potential funding identified as well as committed funding. If you can go to the next slide, please. This identifies the funding that we have to date. Committed, we have over $30 million from our project partners. We anticipate getting another $4.4 million from the state TTIF funds. We were ranked the highest on their project list, so we anticipate that funding will be coming. We also anticipate $75 million from FTA through their Small Starts Grant program. And then we also have an application in for another $500,000 for Rocky Mountain Power for some charging infrastructure, because we will be having electric buses on this corridor. There's still a $4.7 million funding gap that we are looking right now at potential funding opportunities to fill that gap. Janelle Robertson is the project manager on this, and she is here. And do you have any specific questions on this project?
I think the one question I have is on the funding gap piece. Is it a combination of all the above participants? Is there a particular area that we're hoping to look to on filling that gap? Do we have to fill the gap?
We may have to fill the gap. There may be additional Rocky Mountain Power opportunities. Janelle, did you want to jump in? Have you talked to anybody else of the project partners about that? I think we're still just trying to identify those sources. But Janelle, are you available?
Yeah, in conversations with project partners, I think they feel they're fairly well tapped out as far as Ogden City and Weber State go. and Weaver County has contributed a significant amount already. But I know that UTA had at one point looked at potentially using bonding for the gap. I think it was last year we had looked into that. But then also, there's additional Rocky Mountain Power grants for the electric bus portion of that we looked into. There are also UTA bus and bus facilities that could go into this project in the future as well. We're looking at a variety of options.
Yeah. So this is, I'm going to give Janelle, I mean, this is a fairly, I wouldn't say new, but relatively we've been getting the cost estimates in and we're working through this right now. It's the reason why we're presenting some of these BRT projects, and part of it is for you to understand sort of what we might be coming back with on the budget going forward in the 5-year capital plan. But in general, also FTA will be coming in and doing a risk workshop on the project. And that's when we would work with them and finalize the number that they feel they're comfortable with in the full funding grant agreement and with the contingency they want. And we'll see what that number ends up at that point as well. But that'll be done in September. So we should have finalized numbers roughly October. Correct, Janelle?
That is correct.
Yeah, I think we have about a $20 million unallocated contingency right now. So if the risk assessment shows we don't need that much contingency, this gap may shrink.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So I did have one question on the Rocky Mountain Power grant. I thought that that grant was applicable for each charging station, and as I understand it, there's 2 charging stations, and then of course the overnight charging station that will be located at our facilities at in Mount Ogden. Is that accurate, or is it just $500,000 for the entire electric system? How does that work?
So my understanding is that the $500,000 in the Rocky Mountain Power grant was from a 2020 source of grants that they were putting out. We've in discussions Hal had with them, $500,000 was the most that they could contribute in that funding grant scenario. When we said we were discussing other Rocky Mountain Power grants, is they have other opportunities that are coming up next year, I believe, that may increase the amount that we could get.
And
some of the stipulations with those also include providing charging for other vehicles besides just ours. Oh, Hal is actually on the call. That would great. Hal can kind of clarify that as well.
So last year, or the last legislative session, Rocky Mountain Power had a bill passed that allows them to invest into electric charging infrastructure for, and so we're working with Rocky Mountain Power to kind of determine what they could potentially participate with respect to what the new bill allows them to do. So they're working on kind of the rules of the game for the new bill. And so potentially, to your question, Beth, potentially they could contribute to, we'd have 2 high-powered chargers and the depot charger. So potentially they could contribute to those 3 different chargers. So we've got active meetings and dialogue going with Rocky Mountain Power. So we're working with them to potentially get a letter of commitment for the project.
So just to reiterate, once they review how that bill language will impact them, they're going to then come out with a final analysis, and that's where we're waiting. Is that correct?
Yeah. They're working on kind of the taking what the legislature had done and making that into a program. So the bill kind of identified the rules of the game, and so they're working to kind of codify that, if you will.
That's great. Thanks, Hal. I appreciate that, and thanks, Janelle. I know that I probably have said this occasionally, but I want to say it again. I know how excited all of those partners that you have listed there are for this project to be started. They've all committed a long time, I think 10 years for some of these, and I think that they are really, they're really appreciative of all the efforts that we have done. making this an electric system, helping, WSU and making that connectivity. They are very much appreciative and very excited. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on Ogden?
Looks like that's it.
Okay, so Ogden is the farthest along of our current projects, what we're going to be talking about today. Many of the others are more in the study phase or the design phase. So the Davis Salt Lake Connector project is the next one we're talking about. The original locally preferred alternative was a 12.4-mile corridor going from Woods Cross to Salt Lake City with about 3.5 to up to 5 miles of exclusive lanes. You can see the darker area there. We are looking at now maybe extending that as an operationally as enhanced bus from Bountiful up to Farmington. We project 2,000 to 4,200 daily riders depending on the LPA that we select, and 10-minute frequencies in the peak hour. Next slide, please. So the Davis Salt Lake Community Connector project is currently evaluating BRT, both BRT and enhanced bus transit options to better connect Davis County with Salt Lake County from Bountiful to Salt Lake City. There's, as we discussed, potential operational connection to Centerville and Farmington. The project partners who've been active participants are Bountiful, Woods Cross, North Salt Lake, Farmington, Centerville, Davis County, Salt Lake County, looks like it didn't put Salt Lake City, sorry, Wasatch Front, UDOT, and UTA. Currently, we're in the environmental analysis stage, and we anticipate that being completed by next summer. And then we will finalize the LPA and start the design if the project moves forward. Right now, the estimating cost is unknown. It depends on which LPA we select. And the potential funding sources would be dependent on the LPA as well. Small starts, possibly TTIF, CMAQ, Davis County and Salt Lake County both have transportation funds and maybe local partner funds. Hal Johnson is leading this effort. I know he and Beth went to a Bountiful City Council meeting last night to talk about this project, and I heard it went well. So are there any questions about?
Mary, I do have a question. We were meeting with a Salt Lake City Council member a week or two ago and discussing this project, and Beth had identified how there was a lot of interest, particularly at the north end of the line, but through the line that folks wanted to go up to the university. And I wondered whether the environmental of this work that's being done, what's the potential of it connecting? I'm just throwing this out. But continuing on to 4 South and up 2nd or 4 West and up 2nd South to the university and hooking into the university, and maybe either substituting for current lines that run that strip or add something else additional. And I just wondered, would that be a whole separate process or the current terminus?
You're kind of breaking up a little bit, Carlton, but I think I got the gist of what you're asking. Right now, we are looking at operational considerations to go up to the U. Salt Lake City, they've paid for some additional service on 2nd South, and they're happy with that right now, and they would rather have us maybe focus more on maybe another corridor going to the U, but that would just be an operational considerations, and if it was just that, it wouldn't be part of the small starts project if we did do it as small starts, and then we could adjust it as needed to serve, to better serve what we see as the demand in that area. I don't know if that answers your questions or if Hal had any more to add to that.
No, I think you did a great job with that, Mary. I was just going to say, Carlton, we did look at the Salt Lake City Transit Master Plan identifies kind of 4 South, 2nd South, and South Temple as main transit corridors. And so as we've been working on the project, we've thought about the operational connection could be on South Temple as the transit. There's not a lot of as much transit service on South Temple, but we haven't made any decisions on that. We're still working through the Salt Lake City to determine kind of if we do the operational connection.
Thanks, Carlton. That was a great segue onto that, because the discussion overall has been, in at least in terms of the South Davis portion of that, has been this connectivity to the university and research park potentially. So thank you.
And I was just going to mention, there's definitely some big ridership gains to the system if we connect to the university. So it makes it more desirable, the system, because you can get a one-seat ride from all the way from Davis County to the University of Utah, and it parallels the current route 470 that does that service pattern.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this project? Okay, can I have the next slide then? Okay, moving down south, continuing moving down. The next project is the Mid-Valley Connector project. And we've been working with Taylorsville and Mary City and West Valley City for a while on this project. It's a 7-mile BRT corridor with 1.4 miles of exclusive lane along 4700 South. We have 15 stations proposed, and the ridership is estimated at 2,200 to 2,700 per day. And this would have 15-minute peak hour frequencies. Have next slide. So the project would start at the Mary Central Station, where we have both front runner and light rail. It would connect to the Salt Lake Community College and then on to the West Valley Central Track Station. Here's the project partners identified again, the cities as well as UDOT, Salt Lake Community College, the county, and Wasatch Front. We are currently in the final design phase, and that's estimated to be completed by the end of this year. Our next steps is to secure TTIF funding that has been identified and find the additional funding gap, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then we estimate a 2-year time period for that construction. This shows the estimated cost of $40.5 million. And can I have the next slide? So you can see so far we've identified we have committed $9.4 million in project funding. The TTIF has identified $22.8 million. So that's been identified over a 2-year period. Hopefully that'll still be available depending on what the state does with the TTIF funds, but we are hoping and anticipating that will still be available for the project. And there's still an $8.3 million funding gap that we need to work with the project partners to help identify there. Any questions on this project? This project, by the way, has come to the advisory council and they adopted the LPA for the project. We have just not come forward with the funding plan yet to the advisory council because we still have that funding gap. So that the project can move forward once that's approved.
Mary, would there be a UTA portion? I mean, I know at this point we've not committed any capital funds to it, but is there stuff that we would have done that in normal bus service that we might consider here, or are those discussions ongoing?
I believe that the operational cost for this project, we've identified that by changing some of our alignments right now. So we have the operational funds and O&M funds to do that based on rearranging some of our existing routes, but we have not identified capital funds for that.
So Mary, some of the areas we are going, this is Carolyn, going to to Murray Station, and we might make some capital improvements overall to that station, not just for the Mid-Valley Connector. So that would be something that we would take a look at as well. And then some of the funding gap might be something that we could do potentially for a future build grant potential. This came in late, so we sort of missed the last build grant cycle. We had a project already planned to submit for that, but there's definitely opportunities here, and bus facilities, those types of things for this project as well.
A bus and bus facilities discretionary grant would be a good option because we could focus on the improvements, like Carolyn said, just to those stations. So it wouldn't federalize the corridor itself, but it would give us the federal dollars to be able to do those improvements at stations, which would accommodate the line.
Particularly West Valley and Murray, where we're going to see the connections.
Right.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Mary, I had a question. This is, I believe that there's a discussion, and I don't know where this stood on terms of the propulsion systems for electric buses. Is that still being decided?
Right now we're not considering electric buses on this line just because that would add costs with the infrastructure, and also the Meadowbrook garage, which would probably serve the buses on that corridor, does not have that charging potential at this time. It could in the future, we could do that, but right now we're not adding that cost to this project. So. Any other questions? Okay, can I have the next slide? Okay, this is the Southwest Salt Lake County Transit Study. A study was done back in 2012 that identified the corridor shown here on this map, and it identified it as a future potential transit corridor. The mode wasn't selected or anything, but it was identified. Right now, there's corridor preservation efforts underway. Both Harriman and Riverton have preserved significant sections of the corridor that would go through their cities, and then other cities have corridor preservation included in their long-range plans. Can I have the next slide? So a number of studies have identified the need for improving transit options in the Southwest Salt Lake County area. The project partners, as I mentioned, are currently working on preserving corridor for the future fixed guideway option, which could include express bus or BRT or light rail. Right now, Salt Lake County is leading what they're calling a shared vision and growth strategy for that area. That is primarily looking at land use needs and how transportation would serve those land uses. Right now, they're just kind of shifting the focus of that study to look more at the transportation needs in that area. And we are partnering with Wasatch Front, who's leading that effort for Salt Lake County, to identify those needs. UDOT as well is part of that because it's transportation in general, not just transit. So right now we are working actively on the corridor preservation and supporting the vision planning effort. And then we would continue corridor planning based on the outcomes of that effort. So right now there's really not a LPA identified, so we don't have a cost or funding sources yet for that one. Any questions on that project? This would also tie into what's ever happening at the Point of the Mountain, which I believe is the next project I'm going to talk about.
Mary, do we know what the WFRC-led process? Do we have any sense of when the timing of its completion is? I know it's been delayed a little bit with the COVID-19 onset.
I believe we just had a call with them the other day. I think they're trying to get something by the end of the year, but Hal, you were on that call. Do you have additional input on that, the length of that effort?
Yeah, that's what I was anticipating, that we'd see it hopefully wrap up by the end of 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, next slide, please. This is the Point of the Mountain Transit Study, and this is looking at a number of different corridor alignments. So it could be from about a 9.5 mile to a 12.8 mile corridor, depending on the alignment selected. Both BRT and LRT are being considered, as well as some express bus options within those. 6 to 18 stations are being considered, depending on the alignment. And all the alignments cross the prison site, which we are trying to serve. And the frequency would be determined based on what alignment mode we select, etc. Next slide, please. So Pointed Mountain Transit Study is analyzing transit improvements that will serve the urban growth centers and destinations in southern Utah County, Salt Lake County and northern Utah County. The alternatives that are being considered, as I mentioned, are enhanced bus, BRT, and light rail. We are partnering with the cities of Bluffdale, Draper, Lehigh, South Jordan, Sandy, as well as Salt Lake County, Wasatch Front, and MAG, and UDOT and the Point of the Mountain State Lands Authority. Currently, the transit study is currently underway. We estimate that to be completed by the fall with a locally preferred alternative hopefully identified. The next step would be the environmental analysis and preliminary engineering. The cost would be to be determined based on the alternative and mode selected. Potential funding sources could be new starts from FTA or TTIF or local partners or a combination of all of them. Any questions on the Point of the Mountain study?
In those alternatives, you mentioned they all go through the prison site. It looks like they all, at this point, follow the same alignment through Lehigh as you go into Utah County. Is that?
From the south, yes, they would all be pretty much identical going south. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Within our right-of-way corridor there.
Okay.
And Patty Garber is leading that effort on our team for that project. Okay, next slide. This is the Central Corridor Transit Study. This study is focused on a 20-mile corridor from Lehigh to Provo. It would be about 70–80% exclusive lanes is what they're looking at. It would have connections to UVX and the Provo Frontrunner Station, and we're also exploring potential connections to the Lehigh and Vineyard Frontrunner stations. Next slide, please. This study is currently being led by UDOT, but UTA is actively involved in it, and they are evaluating both BRT and LRT alternatives to connect the northern Utah communities from Orem to Lehigh by transit. The current transit route, what serves that is along State Street, it's Route 850. You can see the project partners are the cities of Lehigh, American Fork, Pleasant Grove, Vineyard, and Orem. And MAG and UDOT are partners as well. Currently, the transit alternatives analysis, as I mentioned, is being led by UDOT with much participation by us, and that's estimated to be completed this fall, kind of similar timing as the Point of the Mountain study, since they are going to really have to coordinate. One pretty much ends where the other one begins. The next step is the environmental analysis that will be led by UTA. We have applied for some CMAQ funding through MAG, and it looks like we will probably be getting that funding. We were rated very high on that funding list, so we anticipate getting $3 million grant to do the environmental part of this study. And the cost would depend on the alternative selected and the mode, and potentially maybe eligible for small starts or TTIF. Any questions on this project?
Go ahead, Kid.
Mary, just a couple of comments. You've got the project partners down there. I think this is extending down to Provo, isn't it?
Yes, I should have.
So the cities of Provo and Linden probably would be included in the project partners as well.
Yeah, I believe they are.
Because they go that entire distance.
Yes,
and on the north end of this, hopefully there's an effort. We've talked about this in the past. There's an effort to sync up the Point of the Mountain study coming over the hill with this one coming from the south going northbound. Hopefully they're going to meet somewhere in the Promontory Point someplace.
Yeah, we do have the project teams from both teams are, working with each other, and they're actually on each other's teams. that
Right.
fortunately the consultant doing the study is doing both the point of the mountain and this study. So we have that coordination as well. So it's good.
Mary, does our corridor go beyond Lehigh, the right of way that we're considering in the point of the mountain? And does that come into play at all on this study, or is it just extra corridor that we have for something maybe in the future?
Our corridor does, if I understood your question right, our corridor does extend all the way down. That one of the corridors alignments that the central corridor is looking at would be within our right of way, which would hook right up into the point of the mountain one, which is going down through Lehigh. So that is one option they're looking at. Did that answer your questions?
Yeah, no, it did. When I've driven through there, I know there's a rail corridor that almost kind of goes parallel to the highway, at least for a section of it. And
Yeah.
I didn't know if that's
that.
ours or if that's a different one, and I didn't know how it comes into play in the study that's going on.
Right. On the east side of the freeway, that is UTA owned corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this project? Okay, got one more to go. You got the next slide. This is the South Utah County Transit Study. And this is looking at a 20-mile corridor from Provo to Santaquin. In the regional transportation plan, a front runner extension was identified from Provo to Payson, where UTA owns corridor. A range of modes and alignments are going to be explored in this study. And right now, 2 major educational facilities have planned to have campuses. I believe they're both in Payson along the corridor. Can I have the next slide, please? So this study will analyze different modes and alignment alternatives, including express bus, BRT, and commuter rail. And we want to develop short, mid, and long-term transit alternatives to connect the South Utah County communities between Provo and Santaquin via transit. Laura Hansen is leading this project effort, which is right now a transit alternatives analysis. We, I believe, just closed the RFP for that and have received a number of proposals, and we'll be selecting a contractor, a consultant to do that work. And we estimate it will be about a year for that to be done. The next steps after we're done with the alternatives analysis would be to develop a corridor implementation plan, how we would implement those short, mid, and long-term solutions. And then the estimated cost would depend on what alternative or alternatives were selected. Any questions on this project?
Just one minor question. How long do you anticipate, if you get the transit alternatives analysis done in summer of next year, how long would you anticipate that you would start to establish the funding? It's kind of, I guess, would depend on the local preferred alternative. Is that correct?
Right, and also the implementation plan. There'd be some things that we'd want to do in the short term, which may include better bus service, and then maybe midterm, maybe more of a fixed skyway option. You know, until we get the study done, we don't know, but depending on how we want to implement that and how that area is growing, we would decide how we wanted to implement those solutions.
Thank you.
Trustee Holbrook, this is Carolyn. I do appreciate the question, because in general, as we start to look at all these projects and you know, I think a lot of them offer a good mobility option to the people in the corridors. One of the things we'll be looking at is what kind of funding sources do each of these sort of compete best in those categories or fit best in, and those will be things that we need to sort of work out. So this is a good overview, and it's one of the things, you know, Ogden, Weber State BRT, we have pushed forward with doing the full funding grant agreement and going the federal route. And the other question right now is, are there projects that seem to actually would compete well in that sort of capital investment program that the FTA has? Any of these projects, would they compete? And that's some of the things we'll start to look at, try to put a more holistic plan together as to what fund sources we go with each project.
Right, right.
Thanks. That's really helpful. I appreciate that.
Okay. I think that was my last slide. Is there other questions?
Any remaining questions for Mary? I'm not seeing any, Mary. Thank you very much. This is great to get this overview, and we hope that a number of these projects can move forward when the time comes right. So thank you.
Thank you.
With that, that brings us to our other business, which is our next meeting on July the 22nd at 9 a.m. With that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second?
Motion by Beth, seconded by Kent. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? We'll stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to staff for making the meeting happen.